to the Pointy End. I'm Keith Sutherland. Today my guest is Michael Wasley, Executive Director of Matchworks. Welcome to Bendigo.
Thank you, Keith.
Now you've got some big news we'll come to at the moment, but just Matchwork is a division of Coringal Community Services Organisation, providing a range of services, and I believe it's disability, mental illness, older Australians like myself, of course, coming into that disadvantaged age. So tell us a little bit about the connection between the two companies, because it's sort of unusual to have Matchworks on one side and Coringal on the other, but sounds pretty exciting.
It is, and it's a great history. Coringal started as a childcare service for 8 children with an intellectual disability in '52. Sets of parents didn't have a lot of supports, decided, well, let's start something up, called it Coringal because it's the Indigenous word for happy home. And then over the subsequent decades, Coringal grew its core services to people with disabilities and branched out to help lots of disabilities other than intellectual disabilities only. And then about 20 years ago, the federal government created a new initiative that helped people who were needing assistance get into employment, created some new funding programs, including people with disabilities, but also people without disabilities and other members of the community. Matchworks and Coringal put their hand up. Matchworks was born that day with 2 very small sites, and I sit here today now with as the head of Matchworks. It's quite a big organisation. And
you've got 550 staff, so that's quite an incredible growth in that period of time. 29,000 people that you look after, and it really is, that's an incredible sort of growth, and it probably is a niche market because is there too many others in that space that you're sort of catering for?
There is a lot of providers in the supportive employment space, also within the disability employment space. But what's happened over Australia is essentially the federal government contract out what was their public provider of employment services. And that happened in 1998 where Matchworks started. But over the last 10 years in particular, there's been a refinement of providers who do that. We like to think that our niche is the fact that we are part of a large standing not-for-profit disability organisation. So we have a long history in understanding that people have more abilities than disabilities. People have more opportunities than what challenges they might confront in their life. Just need the right supports and be able to connect the right connections. Particularly with employers. Employers are a big part of that. And then you can actually find that people can actually grow in their opportunities by downplaying some of their limitations or disabilities, getting them to think of what they can do as opposed to what they think they can't do.
Who sort of fits that profile? Because when you sort of talk about those, it's a pretty broad subject, of course. You've got employment on one side, but you've got also the disability part. As we are an ageing society, and I know all about it, I've got an elderly mum and trying to find carers and things like this, so it's a growth area. Bendigo, we've had a bit of a problem with the HAC scheme because council are opting out of it, but obviously it's a growth in these areas, and that's where the service industry and the new jobs are being created in this industry.
Absolutely. The health and community sector is the fastest growing sector in most regions of Australia, particularly regions of Australia with high populations. It's where a lot of investment's coming into. It's probably the area where there's a lot of skill shortages, or still people coming up through school and through education and not realising that that's a really viable and growing industry that you might want to start a career or pursue a career in. So there's a lot of work being done in that area to try and promote the opportunities and the careers within the health and community sector. I think for a long period of time, a lot of people who are working casual or part-time, it supplemented their other work-life balances. But nowadays, there's certainly a lot of opportunities to actually start a career. There's a lot of unmet need. You mentioned that the aged care sector, the disability sector, mental health is a growing sector. So there's a lot of opportunities for people to work in that as a career, which is very important for Matchworks. But also, it's great that the communities are now recognising that investing in these areas is community building rather than in some of the traditional areas that they'd invest in, say, 20, 30 years ago.
And council seems to be adopting that, even though they're opting out of some of the things, they do seem to be wanting to improve that space, so that's really good. Now tell us about what's happening in Bendigo tonight, because Matchworks has been high profile in Bendigo, I've got to say, in the period of time you've been here, even though I haven't been involved in that, but it has got a profile. Now tonight there's something special happening in Bendigo, and that's the reason obviously you're in town today for.
It is. Thanks, Keith. Matchworks started in 2009. I'm very pleased to hear that you say we have built a profile, and hopefully we've built the right profile. We can't set up and do the work we do on our own volition. We have to be appointed government contracts to do what we do. We won a government contract, a fairly small contract in 2009, and that's what saw Matchworks come here. It is part of an organisation that came from Geelong, but we're not a Geelong organisation. So Matchworks wants to be part of the Bendigo community. Over the last 5 or 6 years, we've continued to help people who were unemployed or underemployed, focused a lot of effort and time into helping them improve their skills and their values to employers. At the same time, tried to work in the community with the employer sector to try and get them to understand that with our supports, there are a lot of people with better abilities out there than they understand, and that's worked quite well. Recently, the federal government have changed the tax of their generalist employment contract. The new contract, which started July 1, is called Job Active. In winning a significant growth in that Job Active contract from what we had previously, we'd outgrown our premises in Pall Mall or Pall Mall, depending on what you call it here, next to Maya, and we really needed a bigger premise. New premises became available in St Andrews Avenue. We're opening that tonight officially, even though we started working there a couple of days ago, and tonight we're having a big launch. We're also inviting a lot of members from the employment community to join us and promote what we do and what we can do for them.
And that's what it's about. It's about the PR, being able to network with people, the movers and shakers in town, and they can sort of spruik your product, because obviously you have got a good product, not for profit. But I also see you're quite involved in community events. You've been sponsoring some of the things around Bendigo, and I understand you're sort of part of that charter is looking after refugees, which we're so sick of seeing what's going on in the paper daily. And of course, it's not just Australia, it's the tunnel over in France and into England, and it's horrible to see what's going on. And we've got a fairly sizable Karen community that I have been involved with, the multicultural people in Bendigo, and been to some of their events, and the Karen people are assimilating very well. I shouldn't say assimilating, because they're entitled to be part of our community as anybody else is. So it's a really big part, and it's great that your organisation is supporting those people coming to town and trying to help them in their endeavours to be part of the community.
We're really chuffed about our work with the Karen community in consultation with a number of employers locally, including Hazeldene's. You mentioned the nature of the people from the Karen community. They are fantastic people, they're hard-working people, they've got strong work ethics, they're very respectful for their relatives and their elders, and probably some of the things I think that they're strong at as a community, the rest of Australian communities could probably learn a little bit from. It's like back to the old values sort of system that I think at times we all forget a little bit about. So we've done some fantastic work with the Karen community, but we've also done some great work locally with the Indigenous community through a Deadly Yakka activity we did last year, which was fantastic, and we used our sponsorship with Melbourne City, who have a very prominent Indigenous footballer with them to help promote that. We do a lot of work with people with disabilities and youth, people sleeping rough locally. That's pretty much the Kooringal way, is to help those who need the most support, and that's why Matchworks, as well as finding employment for anyone who needs some help, will always try and put the extra effort into someone who's more disengaged or disadvantaged in the marketplace in terms of finding employment. Employment's such a massive part of social inclusion in our value systems. It's very, very difficult for someone to feel socially included if they're struggling to get employment. So that's where we think we fit in, and that's where we are a part of our Kooringal parent organisation's values.
It's great to hear, because you've seen all the publicity in the last week with Adam Goods, and there is racism out there, there's no doubt about it. Bring it back to a local level, we've sort of got part of it here, but it was also, you've made mention of, coming back to the Aboriginal, tonight the City of Greater Bendigo are debating about reconciliation, how council will be involved in that process. So it's a very important thing coming up to having referendum on the subject, and it's great that our community is to the fore, and as I said, it's being debated at the council meeting tonight. And you also mentioned Hazeldene's, that obviously employment opportunities, which obviously fits with your area. They're great employers of a lot of different people, and they also give back enormously. So it's great that you're sort of partnering with an organisation like themselves, and Kooringal, of course, being able to do something and help those people find that employment.
Hazeldene's are fantastic, and we've had a good relationship in the 6 years, and not an exclusive relationship. There's other providers who do what we do that also have a relationship there. We wish we operate in a lot of metro cities across Australia. be great to have a lot of Hazeldean type employees in those locations, because they get what we're doing. They understand that employment for themselves is not an exact science. They can't guarantee that everyone they employ is going to be fantastic from day one. So they're very tolerant, very patient, very flexible with helping some people who maybe haven't had a great work experience in the past or haven't worked in that sort of sector before, to have a slower lead in, to settle in, to understand. They're very, very supportive. It takes time for people to set into a new job, as it would for any of us.
Well, Michael, thank you so much for appearing on the Pointy End today. It's fantastic, the work that you're doing from Coringal, Matchworks. Good luck with the new premises. I'm sure that only those career opportunities can only enhance our community, particularly refugees, the disability area, and just matching jobs. I think it's a fantastic thing you're doing. Good luck, and it's great that you are part of the community. As I said, you have been high profile for 5 years, 6 years. It's not a long time, but the message is certainly out there. The brand is out there, so you're obviously doing something right in our community.
Thank you very much, Keith.
Thank you.